Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 2025 NRB. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of our supporters who made this convention possible. We can't bring the message of Israel to the world. We can't help educate Christians about their biblical duty to stand with Israel and the Jewish people against the rise of global anti-Semitism without you, without your financial support. So I want to thank you. And I have a very special interview today with Monique Beadle. Monique is an attorney with Jerusalem Institute of Justice.
What?
And we just found out about Monique and the work that she's doing. So it is a great honor for us to host you here, Monique, on our organization that does so much in trying to educate Christians around the world. You know, when we started, I couldn't understand why Christians could have turned a blind eye to what happened in Germany. Why did the church remain silent? And I asked myself, if the church was quiet back then, in a country that was educated, a country that was, you could really say, was Judeo-Christian because there were Jews and Christians living in the country. If they're educated, if they're wealthy, if it's a Judeo-Christian nation, how does humanity remain silent? And if they did then, can it happen again? And I look at what's happening, I'm not trying to draw the parallel, but I look at what happened on October 7th. And I continue to look at the silence of the people, the nation, the nations of the world. And I say, can it happen again? Monique, are we there again? Are we witnessing the silence of the nations following October 7th?
A few months ago, I reread Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, which was written by Theodor Herzl at the end of the 1800s. And he was talking about trends in European life and in academia and in the culture that were a foreboding warning to him. He felt, as a result of his detection of these trends, that the time for European Jewry was coming to a close, and that therefore we needed to have the nation of Israel. And I have to say that when I read that in the aftermath of October 7th, I was haunted by the parallels to where we are today. We are an enlightened and an educated society, just as Germany was. We subscribe to ideals like equality and freedom and dignity, and nevertheless, there are toxic ideologies taking root within our society. And the terminal limit of all those toxic ideologies is the Jewish people. That is always how it has been throughout human history.
So how did you get into this? I mean, you're an attorney with Jerusalem Institute of Justice. You've got a personal story to what has happened, what happened to you post October 7th. Tell us about how you got started. Why did you pursue this issue?
My grandfather is a Nazi hunter, actually, and I've always been inspired by his example. I'd love to tell you his story. He fled Nazi Germany on the Kindertransport as a teenager, spent some time in a Quaker boarding school in England, and when his parents were able to come and get him, he went to the United States. So he came back to Germany 4 years later as an American soldier. He served in a special military intelligence unit. He liberated the concentration camp of Dachau. That's a camp just outside of Munich, which, as you know, the Nazis shipped their evidence to as the Allies approached. My grandfather never really spoke about what he saw that day, but we've heard from other soldiers that they opened cattle cars filled with the bodies of dead Jews. So whatever he saw, it informed his life's mission. He stayed in Germany after the war ended. He hunted down war criminals. He personally arrested 8 of them. He prepared for the Nuremberg tribunals. And then when he came back to the United States, he cashed in his GI Bill, and he set up our family law practice, helping survivors make restitution claims. So you could say that advocacy on behalf of Jewish atrocity victims runs in the family. So I joined the Jerusalem Institute of Justice team on October 7th. That was not the plan. The plan was to start on November 1. Obviously, those plans were escalated. We have United Nations consultative status, which means that we can go inside United Nations headquarters, we can engage with senior UN officials, and we really get a front row seat to the madness.
Does that include the ICC?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
We've been involved in that case. So we, after October 7th, we put out a call to survivors of the massacre, and we asked, who wants to pursue justice, accountability, and restitution for the crimes that Hamas perpetrated against them? There were 17 survivors who said, I want to participate in this project, and we brought them to a studio in Israel, and we taped them. We sat them down for detailed interviews, but instead of sitting in a busy hall like this, we sat them down in a quiet studio, and we basically did a deposition. And as we were filtering through these testimonies, we realized that we couldn't just hold on to them and give them to prosecutors and lawyers and judges. We had a story that needed to be shared with the whole world. We feel that the stories of survivors are the very best antidote to denial. We saw that in the context of the Holocaust. Anyone who's actually sat down with a Holocaust survivor and heard their story cannot deny what the Nazis did. And we feel that anyone who sits down and hears the testimony of a survivor of October 7th cannot deny what Hamas did on that day.
So were you in the United States on October 7th, or were you in Israel at the time? Because you said you were hired that day on October 7th.
I was sleeping in my bed in the New York area, and my husband woke me up with the news. And at that time, there was a lot of confusion. And I remember he said the words, 40 hostages. And I said, oh my God, that's it. This has to change. We can't live next to monsters. And this was when we thought it was only 40. So I called our CEO in Jerusalem and I said, I think I should start now. And she said, yes, of course. What do you need? And I said, let's start with a business card, an email address, and my United Nations grounds pass. So my first day on the floor of UN General Assembly was October 25th of 2023, just a few weeks after the massacre. And it was really shocking to see all of the nations of the world already tipping towards denial and distortion of what Hamas had done on October 7th. And that's why we made this film. The title is Saturday, October 7th. And it's just a 1-hour film that covers the stories of 7 survivors of the massacre. We used their testimonies, which we took deposition style in a quiet room, along with their photos and their videos from that day. And we weave them together in a story that's very emotionally gripping, but it's not gruesome, it's not traumatizing. And we feel that it's a potent antidote to denial.
So the Bibbis family, Yarden's comment this morning, what are your thoughts about his words and what he shared?
I was thinking about the generations of Jewish men who have survived atrocities. I was thinking about all the Jewish men who emerged from the camps of Europe. They had built entire lives for themselves. They had a wife, they had children, and the Nazis stole all of that from them. And I thought how sad it is that now that we have the nation of Israel, nevertheless, this still happens. And this can never happen again. And I cannot see the color orange and not think of the Bibbis boys and of Shiri. And so I just share in his grief, and I share in the rage of the entire nation of Israel and all of the Jewish people. And one thing that really touches me is when I hear Christians expressing the same grief and the same rage. And I don't hear it from every Christian. I only hear it from a few, but every time I do, it touches me, and it makes me hope that maybe this time it's different. Maybe this time Christians won't turn away like they did in the 1930s.
Absolutely. Yes, we see it as well. So the ICC, you've dealt with them, you've testified before the United Nations. What are the response from these halls of government on an international level? I mean, we know what's happening, but how do they turn their head from the obvious evidence of what is going on? How can they? I mean, it's deniability. I mean, they have the evidence. We all have the evidence. We know what happened. How do these people sit back and deny it?
Well, we've actually been surprised how little evidence people in the United Nations system have seen. 2 weeks after the massacre, Zaka, which is the first responder organization that personally handled the bodies, sent us some of their photo database. And we decided to take some first responders to the United Nations headquarters in Geneva and present some of the photographic and eyewitness evidence to senior UN officials. And we sat with them for 3.5 hours in a confidential meeting, and we were surprised by the response. The first reaction we received was, we've never seen anything like this before. No one has brought this information.
And this was the footage from the IDF that the Israeli
This was
government was
photographs
sharing?
taken by first responders showing evidence of crimes against children, the elderly, mutilation, and sexual violence. And they said, we've never seen this before. And then they said, are you sure this is not artificial intelligence? I mean, we have the person who handled the body and the person who took a photograph of the body sitting in front of them explaining what happened to the body, and they're saying maybe it's artificial intelligence.
Oh my gosh, Monique.
So it's an insult, first of all, to the witnesses who we brought all this way, but to us it was indicative of the wall, the haze that has come over the perspective of many in the United Nations system. I think in the case of the ICC, what you had was a prosecutor who was initially quite sympathetic to Israeli victims and survivors. He came to Israel, he met with hostage families, and he initially seemed very moved by their stories. But what immediately happened was there was a lot of political pressure put on him behind the scenes to be, quote, even-handed. Now, what even-handed means is you cannot accuse Hamas of something without simultaneously accusing the Israeli army of something. That's how you maintain a perception of even-handedness in the UN system. And so that really troubled us when we heard that. That was as early as December of 2023 that we started receiving those signals from within the prosecutor's office. So we did not provide testimony to the ICC. We got engaged by fighting the ICC's attempt to exercise jurisdiction over Israeli officials. And that fight is ongoing. To me, the peak of the cynicism was when the ICC finally issued arrest warrants, and when they charged 2 Israeli leaders who are living, they charged a dead Gazan man, Mohammed Deif, just in a way to provide political cover for their cynicism. And it was a deep insult to all of the victims and the survivors of the October 7th massacre that the ICC couldn't even bring itself to charge a Hamas leader who's alive.
So what is the status with all of this right now? Where are we? And honestly, Monique, are we really going to be able to achieve justice for what happened? I mean, I think that's what a lot of us, both Jews and Christians, our organization is proclaiming justice. We look at what happened and we're like, where is the justice? How is justice going to be served in this situation? Because it just seems to never change. It's ongoing. The lies and the deception. I mean, I just took on Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens recently because they bought into the propaganda. They're supposed to be Christians, and they're giving FaceTime to people who are complete, utter liars. And they're promoting their propaganda to the millions of people that follow them. And of course, when I saw Tucker's interviews, I called him out publicly on it, that he was promoting the Palestinian narrative. He was deceived. He's obviously an anti-Semite because he didn't use the technique that he normally does when he's interviewing somebody, especially on this issue. And he interviewed a pastor from the Christ at the Checkpoint. We all know Christ at the Checkpoint's reputation. Yeah. He interviews this pastor. The pastor accuses Israel of occupying Palestinian land. And I called Tucker out on that. When he called me and he said, "Why would you call me an anti-Semite?" I said, "You interviewed this guy and you didn't even have the courage to say, excuse me, read the Bible, you're a pastor, you should know the Bible was given by God to Israel, all 12 tribes, not to Palestinians. That's not their land. Why would you lie? Why would you keep that information from your audience?" Then I said to him, Piers Morgan. He was doing an interview with Piers Morgan. And he said he accused the IDF or Israel of intentionally targeting Christians to kill them in Gaza. And I said to him, excuse me, intentionally? What's the MO for how Hamas operates? They put Christians on the front line. They put women and children and innocent men on the front line so they can be annihilated. What about them, Tucker? Why didn't you call him out? You're guilty of violating the 9th commandment. You're bearing false witness against your brother Judah.
I think it's important for Christians to know that Israel, as a flawed, imperfect country, is nevertheless the best place in the Middle East to be a Christian. It's the only country in the Middle East where the Christian community is growing instead of shrinking. What is happening to the Christian communities of Egypt, of Lebanon, of Jordan, of Turkey, of Iran, of Iraq? There used to be Jewish people, by the way, who lived in all of these countries. Baghdad, you may not know, used to be 30% Jewish. And the Jewish presence in Baghdad, remember, dates back to the Babylonian exile. So Jews were living in Baghdad for 1,000 years before Arab Muslims ever showed up. Now Baghdad is completely Judenrein. It's completely free of Jews. And it really is a part of the devastation of those societies that they ethnically purged all of the Jews from the surrounding nations. In addition to that, I think an uncovered story is the way they also treat other religious minorities, which are Christians. So Israel has many challenges in many areas in which it can grow in its respect for religious freedom and its reinforcement of the Christian communities within its borders. But if you talk to any Israeli Christian, whether they speak Arabic or another language, they will tell you, we're so grateful to live here. We have freedom of religion. We have protection for our rights. And we just want to strengthen this nation because it's the best place that we can live as Christians in the Middle East.
Yeah, Bethlehem and Nazareth. I do a segment in our Boycott This documentary about a tale of two cities. Bethlehem, where now I've heard almost over 90% of the Christians have fled Bethlehem because they are targeted, and they've moved to places like Nazareth, which Christians know that city. It's very familiar to them in their Bibles. And we see this, the Christians who prosper under the Israeli government, but under the Palestinian Authority, not so much. I remember hearing about a story about a gynecologist, a Christian gynecologist in the Palestinian-controlled areas in Bethlehem, who wouldn't go along with the Palestinian narrative on whatever it was that he wouldn't follow along with. And he was stopped at an intersection, and thugs jumped in his car, drug him out of his vehicle, beat him on the street right there. This is a Christian. Did Tucker Carlson cover his story? No. This is the problem, even within media, whether it's mainstream media or Christian media. It's why PJTN is doing what we're doing. We're here at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention to bring your story to the nations of the world, so that the Christians around the world will have an accurate perspective of what really is going on, not listening to their international news, Sky News, CNN, whatever. Somebody has to tell the story to the church, because you're right, Monique, it's not going to happen again. It's different this time, because now Christians are educated and they're standing up for what's right, what's biblically correct. And so I'm blown away by your organization, your desire for justice. Your father, I want to talk just a little bit about that, because, I've watched the movie about the Nuremberg trials. And people say that justice really wasn't executed. There were more people that were never brought to justice during those trials. In fact, people say that it was just a scam. They did what they had to do before all of humanity around the world. That's why I ask you, are we really going to see justice executed after October 7th? Or are we going to buy in to the lie? Are we going to make it, we're going to put on a show like we did with the Nuremberg trials and make it look like we're going to execute justice?
There were many flaws with the post-World War II justice mechanisms. There were several key architects of the genocide against the Jewish people who were put on trial. But many of them slipped through the cracks and made their way to Argentina. And Argentina allowed them to come and set up shop and live with complete impunity. And you'll remember the Adolf Eichmann case. Israel actually succeeded in finding him in Argentina and bringing him back to Israel to face trial in an Israeli court. And there they presented irrefutable evidence that he was one of the architects of the extermination program. Justice is never complete, but it begins with truth, with telling the truth. That's why we feel it's important to share the stories of survivors and to center them in our justice efforts. That's why we work alongside first responders and military leaders who have the firsthand information. The Jewish community learned from the experience of the Holocaust that it was up to us to tell our own story. Now that's a deep burden to put on survivors of an atrocity, that they should have to go and give interviews and do delegations and constantly rehash their story. But we learned the hard way that we were the best custodians of our own story and that no one else was going to tell it. So fortunately, we as a people have learned how to tell stories effectively. We are the original storytellers. We did write the Bible.
That's right.
And these are stories that continue to inspire all of the nations of the world. And we feel that there's power in them. I actually do have confidence that things could change in a positive direction. One of the major obstacles to achieving justice is the fact that the United Nations does not recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization. They recognize Al-Qaeda, they recognize the Islamic State, and they recognize the Taliban as terrorist organizations. And the reason why is because that designation is formed in the Security Council. So if you want to categorize any organization as a terrorist organization, the United States, Russia, and China have to agree. Unfortunately, there's not agreement on this topic between the United States, Russia, and China. However, if that dam breaks and they can reach agreement and Hamas is categorized as a terrorist organization, that means that sanctions go into effect immediately. And that means that we can freeze and seize the assets of Hamas leaders. You know, their estimated net worth is $11 billion. What if we could take that money and give some of it to the survivors, give some of it to the soldiers, help to rebuild the communities that they devastated in the Gaza envelope, and even use some of it for whatever the rebuilding plan is for Gaza. That's money that they stole from the United Nations and they stole from their own people, and it needs to be seized and used for better purposes. So that would be an important step. The other thing is that there are steps being taken in the U.S. government. There's litigation going on. Survivors are suing UNRWA. They're suing different nonprofit organizations in the United States that are providing material support for Hamas.
Right.
They're pushing back against the pro-Hamas campus activism. So there is hope that over time we can achieve some victories and give the survivors a measure of a feeling that there's been some truth-telling, accountability, and restitution.
Those lives that we lost, we owe it to them. We owe it to the sacrifices they made. You know, last year here at NRB, the Consul General to Israel, we were in Nashville. She came up from Atlanta and she showed the 45-minute video that the IDF had put together. And she asked me if I would watch it with her. And so, of course, I agreed to. In fact, my daughters, two of my daughters were there. And we watched the film together. When I walked out, when my daughters and I walked out, we were devastated. And I look at those people, and even when my daughters, when I told them I was going to watch the film, they said, we want to watch it too. And I said, are you sure? Because what you're going to see, you're never going to unsee the rest of your life. And they said, yes, Mom. If we are called to witness this, if Israel, if the Jews had to witness this on a personal account, we owe it to them and their memory to see what happened to them so that we can continue to tell the story. And I so admire and respect what you are doing, what you're doing with your gift and your talent, but also with your legacy, that your father started something amazing and it's passed on to you. And I do believe that passion that we carry is in our DNA. It's passed from your father to you. It's passed from me to my daughters. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing. But before we close up, is there anything that you want to say that you haven't said? This program is going to broadcast to over 2 billion people around the world. So you're going to be able to have your message delivered to these people. What would you say to these Christians around the globe who are going to watch this program? What is our duty? What is our responsibility? How do we help to pursue justice for Israel's sake?
I've seen the same footage that you saw 3 times. And I so wish that everyone in the world could see it without offending the dignity of those whose murders are depicted within it. But we made this film so that you don't have to see it, but you can still understand. And I just want to challenge any Christian who's listening today to take a few minutes out of your life and just listen and sit with the stories of survivors. We made a piece of film that's going to haunt you and it's going to grab you, but it's not going to traumatize you. And what I want to fortify Christians is with the knowledge that actually you can handle it. I've run out of the number of times that a Christian friend has said, I just can't bear it. I just can't bear it. Like they don't want to touch the hot stove. And I have to say that if you truly consider yourself a friend of the Jewish people, if you truly want to support the people of Israel, at some point you have to touch the hot stove. And we made that hot stove as lukewarm as possible so that you can handle it. And we think that your heart and your mind will still be transformed. So I hope that everyone will watch this film Saturday, October 7th, and bear the burden of the survivors' memories and make the burden of their memories a little bit lighter.
So this film is going to be broadcasting?
This film is right now available at our website, jij.org. People can watch the trailer, and we'd love to share it with as many audiences as possible.
It's amazing. Is there anything else you want to speak or say to our audience?
I struggle to find the words to capture what it has been like to be a Jewish woman for the last, 17 months? The beauty of this moment is that we are deeply unified as a people. The beauty is that there are so many people pouring out their hearts and showing solidarity and love to us. But we still feel extremely alone in the world, especially within the international community. I never thought I would live to see the day that the state of Israel would be treated as an international pariah. And it's something that I struggle to explain to my own children. I have a 12-year-old son, and he says, Ima, why do they hate us? And the only thing that gives me comfort is a feeling that we've been through this before as a people, actually for thousands of years. We have a lot of practice, and we have deep reservoirs of resilience within us. So we're actually going to be okay. This war is not over. It's probably far from over, sadly. But we're going to be okay. We're going to rebuild. And I wish that the nations of the world would just understand that there is blessing in being friends with us. And that there is nothing but death and violence that comes from being our enemies. And that's not because we relish war. and violence and conflict. No, we want to have children and grandchildren. That's really all that we care about and we prioritize. And I think that most Christians share that value with us. So I hope that if you haven't woken up already, that you're awake now and that you'll stand beside us.
Amen. Monique, thank you so much for this amazing interview, for this time to come over and share with us so that we can share your message with the rest of the world.
Thank you so much for standing with the people of Israel. We really appreciate your friendship and your support.
It's the least that we can do. We owe it. So, God bless you.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work. I'm going to follow you, continue to follow your work. I'm going to watch the film, and then we'll push it out to our supporters.
Amazing.
Is there anything new coming up that for you guys in your battle?
The primary challenge is getting the film out to as many audiences as possible. And we're working on a number of issues inside of Israel that we're really excited about. A legislative development inside Israel on an issue that we've been working on, and we'll share the details about that in a few weeks. We have been working, we're excited that we just added several hundred new survivors and soldiers to our legal aid docket. It's an honor for us to be able to help them. There's so many people whose lives have been shattered by the war, and sometimes they have hidden disabilities. They have PTSD, they have spinal issues, they have issues caused by the shrapnel in their bodies, and these are things that are hard to prove. And so it's our honor to walk beside people, to take them to the doctors who document their injuries and the scope of their disability, to represent them before the government panels that decide the amount of disability that they're facing. We are the only organization in Israel that provides free legal aid to wounded soldiers. We do not take a percentage of the support they receive from the government. There's a whole cottage industry of private lawyers who do. So we're really honored and excited that we're able to expand our Wounded Soldiers Legal Aid program right now.
You are a nonprofit organization based out of the United States?
We're based in
Israel?
Jerusalem.
Okay. So can people give here in the